This meeting of the Elections, Finance, and Government Operations Committee to order. We do have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of February 23rd. Is there anyone who would like to move approval of the minutes?
I move the minutes.
Thank you. Co-Vice Chair Lee has moved approval of the minutes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The minutes are approved. We have one bill on the agenda today. It is House File 3351. Chair Pinto, please come to the testifying table. This is the only bill on the agenda. As Leader Niska mentioned on the floor, we do have permission to go half an hour after our caucuses are done. I don't know that that will be necessary. We had 10 people sign up to testify, but I want to give full consideration to everything everyone has to say on this very important topic. Let's see. Yes, Representative Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just clarification. Are we going to have time limits on testifiers, just to clarify?
Yes. Probably 2 minutes. I might give a little leeway on some. So I was going to get to that when we got to testimony. But I do know this topic brings strong and deeply held views. Members, I want to set the expectation that we'll approach the discussion in a respectful and thought-provoking way. Our goal is to understand the policy, its impacts, and how it may affect communities across Minnesota. And I'd just like to refer members back to the rules provided by the Sergeant's office that I read on the first day of committee as well, but I won't reread them all here. So with that, Representative Pinto, welcome to the committee. Since you're not a committee member, I will move that House File 3351 before us be recommended to be re-referred to the Public Safety, Finance, and Policy Committee. So thank you, Chair Pinto. Please proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair Quam and members of the committee. It's good to be with you. Members, as I hope that we're all aware, our nation leads the world, leads any other country we might want to be compared to in one significant way and kind of by far, which is the rate at which our residents are injured or killed through the use of guns. That is something that was not a thing that we would want to be distinguished in. And we know that we experience an epidemic of gun violence in our country. We know that when it comes to incidents like the Annunciation school shooting, but we also know that this is something that is impacting our communities every day in ways that are much less noticed than that. I work outside the legislature as a prosecutor in the eastern half of the Twin Cities, and I see every day the impact of gun violence in our communities. My particular specialization has been on domestic violence and sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, and know the impact of that guns have in those situations as well. Members, this week and throughout this session, we're hearing in a number of committees a number of proposals for changes in state law to address this epidemic. Just yesterday, there were bills heard in the Public Safety Committee in the House relating to assault weapons, high-capacity magazines. There'll be other proposals as well. It is my hope that some of those will, that all those will pass. We know that those bills yesterday did not advance in the committee as of yesterday, and I'm hopeful that, that in the words of so many of the parents and families, they have hope in us, and that hope is well placed. In the meantime, though, members, we are hearing from local elected officials that they want to and deserve to take steps to protect their communities. For most of our state's history, they were allowed to do so. I believe it was 1985, there was a law that was put in place that preempts local elected officials and localities from making certain decisions relating to firearms in their communities. Members, we really do need federal action to protect Americans from this thing that we lead the world in by far. Barring that, we need state action. That's up to those of us who are state elected officials. But to the extent that we are not going to be acting as state elected officials, to the extent that some of us are going to be voting these proposals down, well, then we certainly should be getting out of the way and allowing local elected officials to take steps to protect their communities. With that, Mr. Chair, we're going to hear from a couple of those elected officials, from an impacted family as well. I know that we'll have a robust conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. So I have a list of 10 testifiers here. I believe it's in the order that their names were submitted. There are 6 for, 6 against. I'm sorry, 6 for, 4 against. So as I mentioned before, I'll give some leeway just given the sensitive nature of this, but testifiers could aim to keep their testimony to 2 minutes, I would appreciate it. So the first testifier on the list is Kristen Neville. If you could please come to the testifying table, identify yourself for the record, and then proceed with your testimony. And after Kristen Neville will be Rachel James, if you'd like to get ready.
Hi, my name is Kristen Neville. I might go a little bit more than 2 minutes, okay?
That's
I'm a mother of 5 children that attend Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis. On August 27th, our church and school experienced an act of violence that forever changed our families. I stand here not only in grief, but in hope. I hope that we can respond with courage, love, and unity to protect our children and to ensure that no parent endures what we are living through. While headlines fade, our reality does not. Our children still startle at sudden noises and are afraid to sleep next to or past windows. They struggle in a place they once loved, even a soccer game at Allianz Field, because the sound feels like danger to them. That fear does not disappear. As I look at each of you, I ask you to truly hear why it matters. The firearms used that day were not purchased in Minneapolis. They were purchased in St. Louis Park, but they were carried and they were used here. That matters. Because Minneapolis does not currently have full authority to adopt additional safeguards related to carrying, dealer oversight, or local law enforcement within our community, even when we are the ones bearing the consequences. So we are left in a position where a city bears the consequences but does not have all the tools available. Local leaders understand the realities on the ground. They know where children gather. They know which neighborhoods are most vulnerable. They see the strain on first responders and trauma systems. Granting reasonable local authority is not about removing rights. It is about giving communities the ability to respond responsibly to their community's needs. Now, I'm not here to say that any single law would have prevented what happened on that day, and I think that we all can agree on that no matter what side of this room we sit on. But when our community was harmed, we didn't have the authority to respond with additional safeguards tailored to our reality. We are limited in our ability to protect our community. The ability of local governments to pass gun safety measures that fit their community, it strengthens our public safety rather than fragmenting it. As parents, we cannot pass up opportunities for change. Hope is not passive. Hope requires action. Courage is not abstract. It asks us to make difficult decisions. Love demands we do what we can to protect our children. Because of the hurt and harm the August 27th shooting caused in our community, our love calls us to examine what we can do to make change in our city to protect kids. Other communities might feel called to do the same, and I think we should be able to make the policy changes in our community that work for us. And unity means recognizing that public safety is a shared responsibility between local and state governments. We are asking for the light of local authority not to divide communities, but to empower them, to allow cities like Minneapolis to adopt reasonable, tailored safeguards that reflect their realities and protect their residents. We cannot change what happened, but we can strengthen the tools available to prevent the next tragedy. Let us respond with hope, let us act with courage, let us lead with love, and let us stand united in protecting our children. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee members.
Thank you for your testimony. Next on the list is Rachel James, and after Rachel James will be Teresa Tomanek.
Teresa, come on. You can- Thank you.
Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Rachel James. I am the City Council President in Columbia Heights, Minnesota, where I serve on the City Council there. I'm here to express strong support for this repealing of Minnesota's firearm preemption law. So at Columbia Heights, we are a first-ring suburb, a diverse, connected community of 22,000 people in 4 square miles. We're a tight community full of lots of joy and lots of diversity. Our city is also blessed with lots of beautiful local parks that are within walking distance. Unfortunately, those parks and our neighborhoods have become places of danger. The park I take my kids to walk at, Silver Lake Park, had over dozens and dozens of shell casings recovered from a shootout that likely used high-capacity magazines, and houses were hit right next to our elementary school, where over 50 shell casings hit 8 different houses. This opportunity for us to take back local control gives our cities the opportunity to make some decisions in the same way that we have the responsibility to keep our residents safe. I know every community in Minnesota is not the same. I was born in Brainerd, Minnesota, have many family members there. I grew up in rural Stearns County, and I know that different communities need to make different choices based on the needs and the desires of their residents. Us in local government are closest to the people, and we are we're responsible for them in many ways. I also spoke with our local police chief, Chief Markham, about this law and other local laws that we could make that would make his job easier as he's taking our small force out to protect our city. He has opportunities that he could use more discretion in applying permits in our cities and enforcing ghost guns and other things that we would have to think about and do hearings. But right now, we are given the cost to staff our police force, the cost to clean up these incidences, and the human toll, and we're not giving any tools of things that we can do. Firearms are uniquely exempted from local decision-making, and we believe in the principle of local control. In closing, I ask you, please take action, allow us to take action, and allow us to do things that will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
The next testifier is Teresa Tomanek, and after Teresa Tomanek will be Carolyn Jackson. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Freiberg, and thank you to committee members. My name is Reverend Teresa Tomanek. I'm a city council member from Duluth, Minnesota. I represent the entire city, and I'm the immediate past president. I had the honor today to drive down from our beautiful city to come here and be with you. I expected to be nervous. I did not expect to be overwhelmed. I don't know how anyone could pass by those desks in the hall and be able to speak coherently, so I apologize. I'm here to talk about restoring local control to our cities so we can protect ourselves as elected officials and protect our constituents. You may have heard that Duluth's city council meetings are very, I'm trying to think of the word. We have a lot of controversy, we have a lot of acting out. We're trying to figure out how to make our chambers be a place of decorum again. Today, when I came to the State House, I passed through security. I walked through the places to see that. I put my purse through that. In Duluth, we don't have that. We don't have that. Now, at our meetings, we always have one plainclothes police officer in the back of the room. We now have 5 uniformed police officers, and we have no way to protect ourselves. We sit in a horseshoe like you do too. I was able finally to get a secure door behind us, otherwise people had access right to us. And the 130 people that come to our meetings to testify. There have been times when I have not slept at my own home. There have been times when I haven't felt safe. I look around and I look at my young colleagues who have families and I think, why can we not protect them? This is an important part of this bill that would allow us in Duluth, a unique city. We are different than the cities. Our heart goes out to all of you in St. Paul and Minneapolis who have dealt with this in a much more real way than we have, but we are still nervous and we are afraid. We want the cities to have their ability to make their own decisions on gun safety. And this bill, House File 3351, would allow us to keep our people safe. Please think about that. Think about your own safety and not allowing other elected officials to pass the laws in their own cities, knowing their own communities, that would help to keep their residents, their constituents, and their elected officials safe. I thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is Carolyn Jackson, and after Carolyn Jackson will be Dr. Sheldon Berkowitz. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Chair Freiberg and members of the committee. My name is Carolyn Jackson, and I am a member of the Edina City Council, and I represent the entire city. Edina is an inner-ring suburb and with a population of over 53,000 people. Our city hall is 3.5 miles from Annunciation Church. The city of Edina is in the business of safety. We hire and fund police officers, firefighter, paramedics, building inspectors, snowplow drivers, restaurant, pool, and hotel inspectors, all for the purpose of keeping our residents and visitors safe. After the mass shooting at Annunciation Church, our residents demanded that the city council do something. So we proposed and passed a firearms safety ordinance banning assault weapons, large-capacity magazines, binary triggers, and ghost guns, and requiring safe storage. On February 4th, we held a public hearing on this proposal. The residents that testified included family members who had lost a grandchild at Annunciation. We heard from emergency pediatricians who had to treat children who had been shot. We heard from a Vietnam War veteran who witnessed in combat the effect that firing assault weapons has on the bodies of children. Multiple parents and teachers testified on the mental and emotional toll taken on children in our community, not only from the shooting at Annunciation, but also from the repeated shooting drills they have to do at school. Our children should not have to grow up as if they are in a war zone. Our pediatricians should not have to treat children with war injuries. For those of you who argue that the mass shooting problem is primarily a problem of mental health, I learned from these testifiers how our fear of weapons creates mental health problems. I got a call from a resident who had witnessed an IRA bombing as a child. Now he had to witness the Annunciation shooting through the eyes of his child. This type of violence breeds anxiety, stress, and lifelong injury to mental wellness. If the state will not do its part to address the threat of weapons of war to our children, lift the preemption against local action, then cities can do what we do best, keep our people safe.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is Dr. Sheldon Berkowitz, and after Dr. Berkowitz will be Mariah Day. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Co-chairs Freiberg and Quam. Thank you for allowing me to speak before your committee today. My name is Dr. Sheldon Berkowitz, and I'm a retired pediatrician and former president of the Minnesota chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm here testifying in strong support of House File 3351, not only on behalf of our 1,000 pediatricians in the state, but more importantly on behalf of our patients, Minnesota's children and adolescents. As a pediatrician, I often treated things like ear infections, strep throat, or pneumonia. Most of the time, I could prescribe medications, develop a treatment plan, and my patients would usually get better. However, currently, the leading cause of death for children in the United States are not ear infections, strep throat, pneumonia, or more serious problems like cancer. No, today, the leading cause of death for children in the United States is firearms. I cannot write a prescription to prevent death and injury by firearms, but elected lawmakers can pass a law that may help. Local governments in Minnesota have passed evidence-based policies such as safe storage laws, which are proven to reduce pediatric suicide by 12%, or bans on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, which are proven to lower the rate of mass shooting fatalities. As much as I would like to see it happen, the state legislature has not passed these policies, even though an overwhelming majority of Minnesotans support them. Nevertheless, if the state legislature is not willing to act, at least let local governments pass policies that are proven to save the lives of their residents. I'm a St. Paul resident. I've testified before the St. Paul City Council twice on gun violence prevention ordinances, including this past November, just weeks after the shootings and murder of 2 young students at Annunciation Church and School, in support of their ordinance to ban public possession of assault weapons, large capacity magazines, and binary triggers, which was passed. However, this ordinance cannot go into effect while the preemption language exists in statute. The lack of bipartisan legislature in our the lack of bipartisan leadership in our legislature on efforts to truly control this epidemic of firearm violence in our state is unacceptable, prompting local cities to try and tackle the issue on their own. If this bill does not pass, we will all continue to watch our kids die from gun violence. On behalf of the pediatricians in the state of Minnesota, please pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The next speaker is Mariah Day, and after Mariah Day will be Brian Gosh. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair and honorable members of the committee. My name is Mariah Day. I represent the National Shooting Sports Foundation. NSSF is the trade association for the firearms industry. I'm here today to oppose HF 3351. This bill proposes to eliminate Minnesota's longstanding firearm preemption framework, which ensures that firearm regulations are consistent statewide. Doing so would result in a patchwork of conflicting local ordinances, create legal confusion, cause economic harm, and introduce additional compliance challenges for your constituents. This isn't just conjecture. As you are aware, some local governments have already made it clear that they intend to severely limit the ability of individuals living in or visiting their cities to exercise their right to keep and bear many of the most popular firearms in America, firearms protected under the Second Amendment. While a patchwork of local regulations would affect the entire industry, it would disproportionately affect small businesses. Uncertainty also discourages investment. Manufacturers and distributors, evaluating where to expand facilities or to establish new ones, put a premium on a stable regulatory system. Eliminating preemption will signal additional unpredictability and risk, which will absolutely push future investment and jobs away from Minnesota and towards surrounding states. Finally, criminal activity often crosses city boundaries. Eliminating preemption would do nothing to deter those already intent on violating state and federal law. Instead, it would impact law-abiding firearm owners and businesses that consistently comply with the law. Effective public safety policy focuses on targeting criminal behavior rather than law-abiding citizens and legitimate businesses. This bill would replace the clarity of preemption with confusion, consistency with fragmentation, and stability with uncertainty. Please oppose H.F. 3351. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is Brian Gosch, and after Brian Gosch will be Rob Dorr. So welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the House Elections Committee. My name is Brian Gosch. I'm a lawyer and registered lobbyist with the National Rifle Association here today to oppose this bill before you. I respect Representative Pinto, Chair Pinto, and his passion for bills and how he works bills. In this case, however, I really believe that there are certain areas of the law that should be uniform across the state of Minnesota. We see that in other areas. For example, one of the obvious ones is rules of the road. So no matter where you travel, no matter what town, county, city, area in this state, the rules are going to be the same. What lane you have to drive in, whether you use a blinker or not. And that's going to be found at Minnesota Statute 169.022, which reads in part, the provisions of this chapter shall be applicable and uniform throughout this state and in all political subdivisions and municipalities therein, and no local authority shall enact or enforce any rule or regulation in conflict with the provisions of this chapter unless expressly authorized herein. Other areas of Minnesota law that require uniformity across the state, besides firearms, are going to be criminal law, taxation and revenue, human rights and civil rights, environmental protections, and elections law. Again, as you travel around, if it wasn't the way it is now in reference to firearms, how do you know what laws you expect to have applied to you or your constituents? I mean, one town to the next. Would you have to carry a lengthy chart, a flip chart, to see, as I enter into this county or this town, what are the rules I have to live by in reference to firearms? I really believe the better policy is what we have now, uniformity on this category like we see in other categories. And finally, I'll finish with, we've seen what this city did in reference to enacting their own provision, arguably or very arguably in violation of the preemption rules here in Minnesota. And what we may be able to expect is if local governments allow to set up their own rules, they may implement things that are unconstitutional, and that's going to lead to litigation and more taxpayer money being spent. We saw it in places like Washington, D.C. and Chicago where they implemented handgun bans because there was no preemption in those areas. And then those were challenged and then those were thrown out. And so with that, I'll finish my remarks and stand by if Mr. Chair and anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is Rob Dorr here? Okay, I'm seeing it shaking. If he shows up, he can be, I can attempt to fit him into the committee if he does happen to show up later. So next on the testifier list is Anna Leamy. And then after Anna Leamy is Carla Solberg Gillespie. Welcome, I guess, given the fact that the testifier's opponent opposed, if there are fewer of them, you can go for a while longer if you wish.
Honorable co-chairs and members of this committee, thank you. My name is Anna Leamy, Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. When Minnesota adopted statewide preemption, it did so in part because a rural Democrat recognized a simple reality. Law-abiding people who hunt, travel, and transport lawful firearms should not become criminals by crossing an invisible city boundary. That principle protects farmers driving to market, families heading to deer camp, and workers commuting across the metro. A statewide framework reflects a basic structural idea. Counties and cities are political subdivisions of the state. They are not sovereign nations. We would never accept a system where fundamental privileges evaporate at each county line. The Constitution's full faith and credit clause ensures that rights and legal statuses travel from one state to another. Within Minnesota, the logic is even stronger. The state creates the permit, sets the standards, and conducts the background checks. The rules should travel with the permit holder. The proposed bill undermines this clarity, exposing permit holders to a complex mosaic of local ordinances that could lead to inadvertent legal violations and crimes as they travel from one municipality to another. Such fragmentation in regulation could deter individuals from exercising their right to carry, impacting their ability to defend themselves and their families, particularly in areas where they may face deferring restrictions on carrying rights. Preemption is not unusual. Minnesota sets uniform traffic laws so drivers do not face different speed limits and equipment requirements every few miles. The state sets building codes so contractors are not navigating 50 different structural standards. Criminal law itself is statewide. Assault or theft does not mean something different in each city. Uniformity promotes notice, fairness, and equal enforcement. A statewide permit should have statewide standards. Anything else imposes a patchwork that burdens ordinary citizens while doing little to improve public safety. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is Carla Solberg Gillespie. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Chair Freiberg, Chair Quam, and committee members, my name is Carla Solberg Gillespie. I'm a St. Paul resident and a volunteer with Moms Demand Action, and I'm here to urge you to support HF 3551 to repeal the state preemption law so that local governments can enact common sense gun safety measures. The city of St. Paul and Edina recently passed ordinances banning assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, binary triggers, which can only be implemented when preemption is lifted. But these cities aren't alone. In my work as a gun violence prevention advocate, I've spoken with mayors and city council members in more than a dozen municipalities who have expressed their desire to see preemption lifted so that they could enact common-sense gun measures similar to these. Including the basic option to say that guns aren't permitted on properties that they own and manage, just as churches and businesses are allowed to do. Why is it lawful to ban guns at a bookstore but not a library? A couple of years ago, I heard a library director enumerate a long list of weapons that she has seen in St. Paul libraries. Children and teenagers should not have to set their homework down on a table next to somebody's gun. No one should. Thank you for considering this testimony. I urge this committee to support this important piece of legislation.
Thank you for your testimony. That is all the people who have signed up to testify. So I think given the fact that we started 40 minutes late, I am going to move to member discussion because I imagine there's a desire for that. So members, if you would like to be recognized, please indicate to me that you would. Co-Vice Chair Altendorf.
Thank you, Chair Freiberg and members. You know, what happened at Annunciation Church was certainly a tragedy here in Minnesota. And my heart goes out to those families that had to endure this. You know, we never want to see this, right? What really bothers me is that the Democrats are using this terrible tragedy as a political stunt. When we are talking about a constitutional right, Representative Pinto, We know, you know, that we do not legislate this way. We do not govern this way in Minnesota. We do not patchwork together laws across the state. I drive back and forth every day to St. Paul. I also have a permit to carry license. In driving from my home to St. Paul, I would cross 14 cities and townships. It is unreasonable and irresponsible of the author of this bill and of this committee to think that we would patchwork together laws that as I traveled across the state, I would be legal and then not legal, legal and then not legal. This is irresponsible legislation. Representative Pinto, my question to you is, when you were sworn into office, did you take the oath of the legislators?
Yeah, I will turn to, I don't think you did this, Vice Chair Altendorf, but I do think we get close to a line about impugning motives if we're talking about things being political stunts. So I just for members' future reference, let's try to keep this discussion not personal. So Chair Pinto to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Altendorf. I've actually taken the oath repeatedly, not just in this role, but in my work as a prosecutor of domestic assault and sexual exploitation. So I've taken the oath many times, and I feel quite confident that this is consistent with that. I'm happy to explain why.
Vice Chair Altendorf.
Thank you, Chair Freiberg. In the oath of office that we take, we swear to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota. And clearly, this is an unconstitutional bill, as we have the Second Amendment right, and that shall not be infringed. Chair Pinto, I have another question for you. The Annunciation School shooter, do you know why they chose specifically Annunciation School? It was written in the Journal.
Chair Pinto.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Representative Altendorf, I guess I'm a little confused with what you said before then. This bill would simply return state law to as it was for the first 127 years of Minnesota's existence. The U.S. Constitution was in existence. I don't believe there have been, maybe there was one constitutional amendment that came in after 1985 when the preemption law came in. So I do want to make sure to address that first point, that I don't see how returning us to how we were for 130 years of existence could possibly be unconstitutional. We're just getting back to the law the way it was for most of our state's history. Regarding your second point, I will admit I don't know the answer to your second question, but I do want to make sure it's clear this is fully constitutional, just as it was for most of our state's history.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. And Vice Chair Altendorf,
Sure.
yeah, if we could
Okay,
stick to the
thank you.
issue of local authority, I think that is the jurisdiction of this committee.
Chair Freiberg, as people are continually speaking about the Annunciation School shooter, this is pertinent to the discussion that we're having. And this is the words of the Annunciation shooter. This is the words. I'm scared of good guys with guns. I think a school is my best chance at not being shot at. Also in the Journal, quoted, Annunciation seems like a great choice. It's very progressive. So I doubt if even one of the adults is armed. That is the Annunciation School shooter. That is the words from the Journal. Members, I know we're short of time. Again, as a mother of 5, this is a complete tragedy. It makes me feel terrible of what has happened to our state. And I think if any of us had a magic wand, we would do whatever we could to make kids safe. However, this is not the way. This is a bad governance bill, and this is not how we govern in the state of Minnesota.
Representative Acom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the author of the bill, and thank you to all the speakers who came to testify today. I don't think this is a stunt, and in fact, if we look at how Minnesotans feel about the issue, especially about issues around assault weapons and large capacity magazines, in my community, almost 80% of people support limiting access. And so I don't think this in any way is a stunt. This is following what our constituents are asking of us. And I think we heard today from a pediatrician saying the leading cause of death for young people is by firearms. That is startling. That is startling. And as a former city council member myself, I know that we, as council members, are the closest to voters. You run into them at the grocery store, your kids go to school together. You have the closest relationship with the people in your community and the things that they value. And so I think allowing cities to be able to be reactionary to the wishes of their constituents, it only makes good sense to me. And I think back to when I was on the Minnetonka City Council, and we passed Tobacco 21, preventing access to tobacco. And it took, we were one of the early adopters, and there became a groundswell of other communities that joined in that effort, and my first year here in the legislature, we passed it statewide. And so I think that there is a disconnect when we have something that is widely popular by the people within our communities, and yet we have such a divided partisan issue. And so I don't think this is a stunt. I think this is reacting to people within our state and listening to the people within our communities. So, Mr. Chair, and to the author of the bill, Chair Pinto, I strongly support your bill, and I will be voting in support of it today, and I appreciate you bringing it forward and giving cities the opportunity to be able to vote on this. And what I will also say, the mayor of my community was here amongst other mayors. He's a non-Democrat mayor of my community, who came to support this preemption repeal. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about this today.
Thank you, Chair Acom. Representative Roach.
Thank you, Chair. I met with some of the testifiers here today and had some good discussions with them and many other family members of the Annunciation shooting. It's a travesty. As Representative Altendorf had mentioned, nobody here wants to see children be victim of gun violence. It's a tragedy. But at the same time, the guns aren't the ones that are committing the crimes. Hate is not in the barrel of a gun. It's in the heart of a man. To try to make these laws and take firearms away from law-abiding citizens, it's a brazen assault on our God-given rights. Representative Pinto had mentioned that he wants to get us back to where law used to be. The Second Amendment and this right predates government. This is a God-given right. The Second Amendment is a God-given right bestowed to us by our Creator. So, I would not support this in any way, shape, or form, and as many other issues that were brought up. Patchworking these rights is far from how we solve any problems. This is a cultural issue, not a legislative issue. We can't legislate the will of people. It's unfortunate, but that's not the way we can go about doing this. So, I stand for the Second Amendment and the rights of people to carry a firearm and protect themselves and their family. And so I will not be supporting this.
Thank you. Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, Representative Pinto, could you clarify for me, if this bill were to become law, would this require any city to do anything?
Chair Pinto.
No, Representative Coulter, just the opposite, just gets out of the way. It doesn't require anything.
Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Pinto. That's what I thought. And so I would say that anybody who has constitutional concerns about anything that may come forward as a result of this bill, your issue is with those cities, not with the state of Minnesota. I want to be clear that I am struggling at the moment. Annunciation is in Representative Greenman's district, but it's also in my community. It is blocks away from the church where I was baptized, where I was a Sunday school teacher for 13 years, and where you'll find me sitting most every Sunday morning, and where Fletcher Merkel's memorial service was held. And so I get a little emotional remembering that service and singing the Cathedral of the Pines camp songs that we did. So I'm going to do my best to keep it together here. I also served on my city council for 5 years, and I know many of us on this committee come from the world of local government. And so it's kind of disheartening to me to hear some of the same people who will champion local control at every step of the way now run from it. We hear this word patchwork a lot. In fact, somebody used the phrase a complex mosaic, which I thought was pretty beautiful poetry. That's the whole point of local control. The whole point is that every city can make the decision for itself. And that already exists. If you don't believe me, look at your local zoning code. And somebody else actually referenced rules of the road. Cities have control over speed limits on local roads. That is how local control works. And it is a balance, to be sure. But I'm actually of the belief that public safety, matters of public safety, are where local control matters the most. And not just because, as Representative Acom said, because mayors and city councils are closest to the people, but they're also the ones who hire and fund our city attorneys and our police officers. They're the ones who see most directly what matters and what public safety looks like in their communities. And, as Representative Pinto said, this bill doesn't require anybody to do anything. If you are concerned about what your mayor or your city council is going to do, you could go talk to them. Voting for this bill shows that you trust mayors and city councils to legislate thoughtfully. It shows that you trust city attorneys to charge and prosecute fairly. And it shows that you trust your police officers to enforce the law without fear or prejudice. And to be frank, voting against this bill sends the message that whatever allegiance you may have to local control, your higher allegiance is to the guns. Thank you.
Representative Davis.
Thank you for that warning about impugning motives, Mr. Chair. It is very much appreciated. I too will speak from my heart, as many of us have done. The Second Amendment protects a right to bear arms. And you tout that it doesn't require a city to do anything. It gives the city a right to violate rights. That's what it does, Representative Coulter. The right to keep and bear arms is endowed by our Creator, as affirmed in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of this nation. Shall not be infringed. It was a message to government. You shall come this far and no further. It deters rights for women, minorities, and those in high crime areas who rely on firearms to protect their families. And at a time when certain mayors in metro areas are making it very hard for law enforcement to do their job, it's even more critical. Minnesota's preemption law reflects our founders' wisdom, and that's why it was passed, Representative Pinto. Fundamental rights must be protected uniformly against fragmented government infringement. We do not do patchwork together, we do not patchwork together laws across the state. And certainly not against constitutional rights. This bill is not about empowering or protecting people, Representative Pinto. It does just the opposite. And I want my constituents to be able to protect themselves how they see fit, and not just my constituents, but all 7 of my children, because not all 7 of my children live in my district. That, to me, is common sense. Murderers and mass shooters do not care about the legislation we're talking about right now. They don't care. They're not going to adhere to it, no matter what law is passed by a local municipality. Members oppose HF 3351 because we need to protect our sacred rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Davis. Vice Chair Lee.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to go back to the bill because it seems like there's a lot of confusion about what this bill will actually do. And I wanted to ask the bill author to just explain something that one of the witnesses mentioned earlier. So, right now, libraries in the city of St. Paul cannot ban guns, but the local bookstore can. Right, and I'm wondering if the author can explain, like, if this is a problem that the bill is trying to solve, and maybe you could just, explain what this bill will actually do.
Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Lee, correct. My understanding is that, or I know that that cities at this point cannot have the same prohibition on firearms in a library or community rec center, that sort of thing, that a private business could decide to do. This would be an example of something, and I think you're well aware of, both of us being St. Paul delegation members, of the shooting at the Jimmy Lee Rec Center, and something that was been a big concern in our community. But yes, that'd be an example of something that I believe would be permissible under the bill.
Vice Chair Lee.
Thank you, Chair. And so it may come as a shocker to some of our colleagues here, but we already operate in a patchwork of laws. When Minnesota passed our concealed carry law, right, we allowed private businesses to ban guns on their premises, right? And so I hope that the members who come to St. Paul who are packing respect those signs when they come to our city and see that there are establishments that don't want guns on their premises. I think that's really important. And so, we had, I think maybe an extra 30, 45 minutes earlier on the floor where our colleagues were talking about the Constitution and cases. And so we have a Supreme Court for a reason, right? There's a reason why we have these justices who interpret what the Constitution means to us. And, in various instances, just because something is enumerated, in the Constitution doesn't mean that it is unfettered. And so I want to make sure that folks understand that. I also want us to also recognize that in Minnesota, we have a number of tribal nations that ban guns. And, we operate within this network as well, right? We already operate in a patchwork of laws where some people, when you go to certain places, are told guns are banned on these premises. And so it is untrue that, what this bill is doing is new. And I also want to point out that one of the witnesses said that, Rep. Pinto's bill would be changing long-standing laws in Minnesota. And I want us to remember, and I know the author brought this up, that we didn't have this law on the book to preempt local governments from making decisions for their own communities until the 80s. I think either 81 or 84. And so that's a little bit older than me, but that's not very long. And finally, because I think, just because we are short on time, before I close, I do also want to share that this is really hard for a lot of us, and I just want to thank all the parents who have found the courage within themselves to come and share their stories and share their pain with us. I think it's really shameful to suggest that this is a stunt that any of our family members would want to do. And I just hope that, our committee works in good faith to protect the constituents that we are sworn to protect, and that means everybody in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lee. Representative Roach, did you have a quick follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I kind of find it funny that we have legislators in here that don't even know that it's not a conceal and carry, it's a permit to carry, and yet they want to talk to us about changing the law or making it not having patchwork. It's a permit to carry. That's the actual term. So, I mean, this is a brazen attack on the Second Amendment. It 100% is. This is, political theater as usual. And, I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Representative McDonald, or Chair McDonald, excuse me.
Mr. Chair, this is indeed a difficult topic due to the fact there is sin in our world and murder and killing. And unfortunately, that will be with us until the good Lord comes back a second time. And it is difficult as well because we do have our constitutional rights, which are so important and dear to us. Our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, our freedom to write and bear arms. And those constitutions, as Thomas Jefferson said, in questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down with the mischief by the chains of the Constitution. The chains of the Constitution. So when they wrote the Constitution and our Bill of Rights, they knew that man and women would at times want to change the Constitution, but we must not change the Constitution when it comes to our rights that are given to us through our founding fathers and from the good Lord above. The chains of the Constitution. If at all, Representative Pinto, I thought that this bill could prevent anyone from being shot by an evildoer in a sinful nature, then I probably could support it. But unfortunately, sin and killing will be with us and evil until, as I said, the second coming. That's my personal religious belief, and I believe it is yours too as a fellow Catholic. So we must be careful and diligent when dealing with our constitutional rights, because once one is changed, then the next is to follow, and the next, and the next, and the next. And I agree with our founding fathers and our founding fathers here in Minnesota with the Constitution, to bind our hands with the mischief, with the chains of the Constitution. And our founding fathers here in Minnesota knew that it was so important that they put it into our Bill of Rights as well. We all read our Article 1 of the Bill of Rights, of our rights to government exists for the security and benefit of the protection of people who hold inherent political power and the right to alter or reform it when needed. When needed. Freedom of speech, press, assembly, so pertinent and important to us. Protections against unreasonable searches and seizure, due process, trial by jury, and no excessive bail. We've seen what happened in the last couple months in Minnesota, and some of our residents lost some of their constitutional rights in unnecessary searches and seizure. I mentioned that on the House floor today. We also, in our Article 1 Bill of Rights in Minnesota, is the rights of freedom and establishment of religion. And we fought 2 years ago to protect that, didn't we, Representative Pinto? There was a bill on your side to take away that right. And then other rights in the end of Article 1 is other rights like bearing arms, quartering soldiers, and enumeration of the rights not denying others retained by the people. So once we decide that one part of our Bill of Rights is not important, we can change it, then others shall follow. And I'll close with this, Mr. Chair, and thank you for giving the opportunity. In my soul, in my heart, if your bill could save any innocent child, man, woman, from being murdered by an evildoer, which is against the law already, thou shalt not kill, then perhaps I would support it today. But it will not do that, and it'll only exacerbate law-abiding citizens who have the right to carry to be breaking the law. Honest, good people who have the right to carry are not our problem. We all acknowledge that we have a mental health crisis in our nation, in our world. And Representative Pinto, I cannot support your bill today because of those rights, but I continue to pray, and we continue as a legislature to do everything we can to help those who have mental illness that are meant to do evil in our world, and especially killing our innocent, beautiful children.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think if I asked Representative Pinto the question to respond to the constitutional arguments that were being made, we'd be here all night. We talked a lot about it in Public Safety Committee. What I will just say is all of the legislation we're talking about has been upheld by every court, every appellate court that has looked at it. So when we talk about an assault weapons ban, when we talk about a high-capacity magazine ban, we had one on the books in the federal for 10 years. We have, again, there's lots to go in there, but I just sort of to correct the record on that. But that's not this committee's job. And I am going to try to hold it together, too, because this is really personal. And I do want to start, Representative Roach, I know you met with families, and I just want to say thank you. And I know that this is a very human thing. Representative Altendorf, responding to the demands of your constituents and 2/3 of Minnesotans is not a political stunt. It is our job. It is our job to listen. It is our job to listen to the evidence. And it is our job to keep people safe. And when 69% of Minnesotans say they want us to do something, sounds like, because we're in a tie, we may not do it here. I still have hope. But we should at least let our local governments take action that their constituents are responding. And I will say, platforming a mass murderer to make a point is shameful, especially with the families in the room. So I want to apologize to you because you shouldn't have had to listen to that. You should be able to come here and tell your stories. And we should listen. We may not agree. We don't have to agree. But we should listen and try to understand. And so I want to say the names of the 2 children we lost, Harper Moisky and Fletcher Merkel, 10-year-old, 8-year-old. And I want to invite you to go look at their desks, their volleyball, their batting glove, their notes. And I can't name the dozens of students, kids who are nursing serious injuries because we would be here until after committee time is on. This isn't just about my community. We just were the most recent community to join communities around the state and the country who have lived through and are living through the injuries and the epidemic of mass violence. And so when we hear in committee after committee, this is the second, we've been here 2 weeks, and this is the second committee we've had. We've already heard hearings in the Senate. I think we will hear more hearings of communities we have heard healthcare professionals, we have heard first responders, we hear families asking us and telling us what evidence shows. We know it cannot stop every shooting, but we know evidentiary, it will reduce harm. We need to listen. And when we hear in committee after committee after committee the voices of people And then on the other side, what we hear are people who are either paid to sell guns or paid by people and proponents to propagate and put more guns into our community. The choice is really, really clear. And the question for us is which side of that we're going to be on. As Kristen said, hope is not passive. And so when I hear this is not the right policy, or that's not the right policy, and this is not the right policy, we have evidence. We have decades. And in the United States, we have a unique problem because other states have mental health, other countries have these issues. But yet we are the only country in the world that has chosen to respond to this epidemic by school shooter drills that traumatize our kids and not actually dealing with the guns, the weapons that were made for war, designed for war, Eugene Sterner's invention, that are now doing the same thing they were designed to do, rapid-fire, high-velocity weapons that are doing in our schools and our grocery stores what they did on the battlefield. So I know we don't have all day. I'm just going to end, one, by asking for a roll call, because hope is not passive. Hope requires action. And one thing we can do today is take action and say, if we're not going to do this at the state level, we certainly should let local communities decide what works best for them to protect their kids and their families. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd ask for a roll call.
Thank you, Representative Greenman. A roll call's been requested. There will be a roll call. Representative Gordon, you added yourself to the list a little late. I do want to make sure your co-chair, Quam, has the opportunity to speak for a little bit. So if you could keep your remarks brief, I'd appreciate it, but proceed.
I'm always brief, Mike. As a former mayor, I'm a big fan of local control, and whenever possible, I think that's a great thing. I've got some bills that hopefully you guys will all be able to support, since they'll be dealing with that issue. But when it comes to local control infringing on our constitutional rights, that's not something I can support. And the other thing I was going to do was ask for a roll call, which Representative Greenman already did. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Gordon. Vice Chair Altendorf, did you have a quick follow-up?
Thank you, Chair Freiberg. And yeah, my name was invoked, and I do want to address that. I think I have the right to do that because it was insinuated that I don't care. And actually, the reality is I care so much that I refuse to lie to the families. I refuse to lie to the people in this room who think that if we pass this bill out of this committee today, we have all of a sudden made everyone safe. I refuse to lie to people to think that we can patchwork together laws across this state and that a killer, a monster, who said in their own words that they were going to this school because they felt like it was a soft target, that someone in that mental condition could not drive across the border and get that same weapon in Wisconsin or Iowa or somewhere else. So please do not, as you were saying in personalities, try to suggest that I don't care, because I do care so much. I love people so much that I refuse to lie to them.
Chair Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple clarifications. One, someone was bringing up on tribal lands. Federally defined sovereign territory, it's separate, and there are things that the state and even the federal government doesn't, constrain. But that'd be too far in the weeds, but just a clarification on that. The other thing is.
Sounds like a patchwork.
Yeah. State law is over local law. State constitution is over any state legislation and statute. Federal law is over state law where there's a conflict, and federal constitution is the primary. So the U.S. Supreme Court has determined on multiple occasions federal law or state law that has crossed a line on constitutional, privileges and et cetera, and that would be, much longer discussion, but that is part of the debate. To me, this bill is taking over something that was passed, I believe, for bag bans and some other things that were happening locally. And it was to prevent something that was in the works of happening locally, but it was nothing related to a constitutional right. So when I look at, there's a difference between federally constitutionated rights and, you know, a difference between local and state law and those arguments. It's a charged subject, but the core of this bill negates what was debated about not allowing local governments to pass things that should have been defined by the state. And I do not remember in any of those discussions debating over constitutional rights, because that supersedes state and local law. And federal constitutional rights supersede anything out of the states. So I will sit back and see how the vote comes out.
Thank you, Co-Chair Quam. I'll just, before letting Chair Pinto make the closing remarks, I'll just say a few things. So we do often let local units of government serve as the laboratory of policy, and it's particularly true in the public health context. And violence related to firearms certainly is a public health issue. You know, granting local government authority is consistent with how we handle regulations relating to commercial tobacco, to name one example. It's also true that we sometimes preempt local government authority. Chair Quam mentioned bag bans as one example of that. But as the legislative body for the state, just to turn this, you know, back to the issue of jurisdiction to this committee, we do have the ability to change from a state of preemption to a state of local authority and vice versa. You know, as Chair Pinto mentioned, the state of law this bill would bring about was the state of law for a long time. You know, we already heard the firearms bills discussed yesterday did not pass through that committee. I'm hopeful we can change the result of that, given the widespread support there is for policies such as those. But given the possibility of inaction at the state level, there is a clear need, I think, for Chair Pinto's bill, so local governments can pick up the slack if the state government falls short. Thank you to everybody who testified on this. It's a really difficult issue, particularly the parents of the school. I can't imagine how difficult it is and what you've gone through. So with that, Chair Pinto, you have the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I'm hearing, I'd heard a comment from Representative McDonald saying that you're confident that if there was any chance that this could be helpful in some way, you'd be supportive, but you're confident it couldn't. And I guess I don't know where that particular confidence could come from. I'm not confident that, in fact, this or any particular thing would help in any given situation. And we can talk, Representative Greenman referenced research and statistics. There's various reasons to believe that various things could be helpful. I don't understand that confidence the other direction. I will say that it's not just it's what we experienced at Annunciation Church and School, and it really is what we're experiencing every single day in our country. When I look into, I know the reference to things being driven by hate and by mental illness. I think many of us believe that this is the greatest country in the world. I suspect my Republican colleagues would agree with that. We are chanting together, USA, USA, USA. Other countries have hate, other countries have mental illness. Is there something, does our country have such worse, are we much worse than all those other countries? The difference in our country is the guns. And the difference is how we choose to engage with the guns and the babies and the children and the people that we lose to guns. The Second Amendment cannot possibly be threatened by this for the very reasons my Republican colleagues have referenced. It is a right under the U.S. Constitution. You don't lose your fundamental rights when you cross boundaries. I heard somebody say that. That's not possible, right? Because it's your constitutional right. It may be that a city passes something that you believe violates your constitutional rights, then you'll take action at that point. This in no way can possibly violate the Second Amendment right, because the Second Amendment is your constitutional right. It's simply saying that the state is not going to step in and prevent cities from taking action that may or may not violate your rights. But what they can do is have the city councilors use that magic wand that they have. There's a reference at one point that if we had a magic wand, we would use that magic wand to help. Each of us has a magic wand. It's our election certificate. Each of us sitting here, those families coming here asking us to act, they don't have that magic wand. We do. We should be using our magic wand, yes, to have action at the state level, even the federal level. If we choose not to use our magic wand in that way, if we choose to ignore what is happening and not act, because remember, we're not talking about doing anything else, we're just not acting at all. At the very least, let's not prevent cities and localities from acting. Let's not use our magic wand, which is what we're doing, to block them from protecting their own residents. Members, our Minnesotans are calling out for us to act. We need to listen to them and act. And at the very least, let's let local governments listen to their constituents and keep them safe. Please, please pass this bill. And one final point I just need to say, I really would ask us to look into our hearts as we're referring to one another with stunts and political theater, et cetera. You may completely disagree with every aspect of this, but I would hope you would recognize that your DFL colleagues are bringing sincerity to this. We want to keep our residents safe. You may think we're completely wrong-headed about that. I can assure you, some of us feel very much the opposite direction about our colleagues, but we recognize that there is a sincerity in trying to keep residents safe. So please do not leap to stunt or political theater when it comes to this. That is extremely corrosive, and in a way, that's as dangerous as I think that our gun violence is, that's perhaps the most dangerous thing out there. Let us not do that, colleagues. Let's please take action to keep our residents safe, or at least let cities do that themselves. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. With that, I will move to re-refer House File 3551 to the Public Safety, Finance, and Policy Committee. A roll call has been requested. Mr. Ollendorf, please take the roll.
Chair Freiberg?
Yes.
Freiberg, aye. Chair Quam?
No.
Quam, no. Vice Chair Lee?
Aye.
Lee, aye. Altendorf, or Vice Chair Altendorf?
No.
Altendorf, no. Representative Acom?
Acom, aye.
Acom, aye. Representative Coulter?
Aye.
Coulter, aye. Representative Davis?
No.
Davis, no. Representative Gordon?
No.
Gordon, no. Representative Greenman?
Aye.
Greenman, aye. Representative McDonald?
Nay.
McDonald, no. Representative Roach?
Roach, no.
Roach, no. Representative Vernick?
Aye.
Vernick, aye. Mr. Chair, there are 6 ayes and 6 nays.
There being 6 ayes and 6 nays, the motion does not prevail. Thank you, members, for the testimony. Chair Quam, did you have, we are a few minutes past time, but okay, Chair Quam is declining, so with that, we are adjourned.